Greetings, yogis. Welcome to the second half of the first class of yoga philosophy. In the first portion of this class, we just asked ourselves the question, what is yoga? And hopefully that was interesting, if not instructive for you. In this class, we're going to take a quick look at yoga history. We're going to begin our view of yoga history in about 3000 before the Common Era. We're going to end with the year 2020. In other words, we're going to try to cover 5,000 years of history in half an hour, which sounds ridiculous, and in fact is completely ridiculous, but we'll give you an idea of the broad themes. Yoga has some of its roots in the Indus River Valley civilizations, a civilization called the Harappan civilization that existed in that portion of India prior to the Indo-Europeans coming, which happened somewhere around 2000, 1800 before the Common Era. In that civilization, there were concepts of Brahman, Atman, Moksha, Samsara, and those concepts became part of the worldview and the religion and religious philosophy that have endured in Hinduism up until today. Somewhere around 2000, the Aryans came down from the north, and that used to be referred to as the Aryan invasion. Some scholars now like and prefer the word the Aryan migration of these people, and they brought with them their language. And that language we now refer to as Proto-Indo-European, and there are at least four now well-known languages that have their taproots in Proto-Indo-European. You'll recognize probably most of these words. Sanskrit, the language of Hinduism, basically, the language of many of our yoga poses, is the easternmost language that grew out of Proto-European. And then moving westward across the world, Hittite, which was a language of what is now Turkey, was then the Hittite Empire, and then Greek, and then Latin. These four languages all have the same taproot, and a lot of the same mythologies and deities. In any case, that's where we start. And then we move forward, and we will just touch on a few things. There are a few slides that I think are really worth looking at. Pause. Let me just look at this as I'm talking to you. The fifth slide is about the Vedic period. Well worth spending a few moments reflecting on. And then when you move to the seventh and eighth slides, we talk about the great epics of Hinduism, the Mahabharata and Ramayana, both well worth a few moments of reflection and reading. And then further on, the 10th slide is on the Tantric era, the 11th on the beginning of Hatha Yoga. Those are all slides where I'd suggest you pause. But I'm a bit ahead of myself. I'm a history buff. I confess it. I love this stuff. I find it really interesting. So I have built into each slide lots of links, opportunities for you to explore. There's links to Wikipedia, to Yogapedia, to ancient history, encyclopedias, to Vedic web pages, Hinduism.net, and you're welcome to explore these things as much as you'd like. I would think that realistically you could read through this slideshow and listen to my voiceovers on a few of the slides in about 20 minutes. And you could probably spend 5 or 10 hours exploring all the little options and more detail if you'd like to. That's entirely up to you. If you're doing this in the hour dedicated for self-study of yoga philosophy prior to class, you only have an hour, only half hour now. So you won't do a whole lot of the extra exploration, but you're welcome to come back to it, explore. If you're doing this ahead of time, take your time and enjoy it. Just note that when you get to any given slide, you get to the slide, you click again, and that's when I'd be speaking. I don't comment on every slide, but I do on several of them. Enjoy it. I hope it's really fun for you, and I hope you learn something. Take notes, write down your questions, and then when we meet in our live discussion, I really want to encourage you all to come with the things that you want to talk about and explore. Because again, I love this stuff, and I can get lost in it. Enjoy. See you in class. We often hear that yoga is 5,000 years old, and that's partially true. We're going to begin this study, as I mentioned in the introduction, in about 3,000 before the Common Era, and that's called the pre-Vedic era. There's a link to the Khan Academy class on the beginnings of ancient India, which might be interesting for you. What's important for us to realize is that the Indus River Valley civilization flourished, and it did so for probably a millennia. At some point around 2000 to 1800 before the Common Era, the Aryan people came down from the north and overlaid the culture. We used to always refer to that as the Aryan invasion. Some current literature refers to it as the Aryan migration. But the Aryan people came down, and they brought with them a number of things, including the language Sanskrit. Sanskrit is one of the major language groups that grows out of Proto-Indo-European. The others, by the way, if you think about moving across the world westward from India, after Sanskrit it would be Hittite and what's now Turkey, and then Greece, and then which would be Greek, and then Latin. So those four languages that we know are all the first, second generation fallout from Proto-Indo-European. In any case, all that happened somewhere in the 2000 BCE period. There are a few elements of belief from the Harappan civilization that very much impact Hinduism. So take a read, poke around, and enjoy. You'll note on this slide that at the very bottom, I just mentioned the Buddha. The Buddha, of course, grew up Hindu, and Buddhism is viewed as one of the heterodox schools of Hindu philosophy. There are 6 orthodox schools, of which yoga is one, and 3 heterodox schools, of which Buddhism is one. But there's a distinct relationship between the Noble Eightfold Path in Buddhism and the 8 limbs of yoga in Patanjali. So we'll explore that a little bit later. At this point, I just want you to know that we will be spending probably a whole class or half a class on Buddha and the Eightfold Path. So here it's just worth a mention. Enjoy. This slide and the next are about the great epics of Hinduism. The Mahabharata is the story of the struggle between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. The reason it's so critical for us is the Bhagavad Gita is part of it. It's one of the chapters. And we'll be reading the entire Bhagavad Gita during this YTT, and we'll actually be reading it in sections. We'll have a third of it, that is 6 chapters. There's 18 altogether. We'll do 6 on 3 different classes. And my hope is that you've read the introduction by Eknath Vasaran prior to coming to class. Just know that that's set in the context of an epic, one of the largest epics in the world. Also on this slide, note the link to the YouTube video just above the picture of Arjuna and Krishna. Hilarious and fun video. At this point, we look at the other great epic, the Ramayana, which is the story of Rama, and his wife Sita. The imagery of chair pose comes from the Ram story, as does Hanumanasana. Interesting mythical material that feeds the practice of yoga. And although it's not included as one of the 2 great epics, the Devi Mahatmya is, in my opinion, quite critical because it's focused on the divine feminine And those of us who practice a somewhat tantric perspective or even a hatha perspective give much credence to the feminine trinity in yoga and the power of the divine feminine. And this particular epic celebrates the victory of Durga. In any case, well worth taking a look at, and another piece of literature that will have some impact and provide some inspiration for yoga practice. One of my early yoga teachers described Tantra as the radical acceptance of embodiment. So often we find in religious traditions around the world, not just Hinduism, but a denial of the body. Somehow the body is evil and the soul is good. We think of Christian saints who would wear hair shirts or engage in self-flagellation to punish their body so their spirit could flourish. We think sometimes of even images of Hindu saints who are doing things pretty uncomfortable for their bodies. So the tantric view changes all that, and it says essentially that the body is good and that we can actually find enlightenment in the embodied state. So it's worth taking a look at this. And in the very beginning of the next slide, I ask you to pause and I ask you to identify what the images are that come to you when you think of the word tantra or tantric, and the same with hatha. What does the word hatha conjure up in your mind? And I think you may be surprised to learn that they have similar taproots in essentially mysticism. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika is the first text that actually lists a series of asanas. Up until now, yoga has been largely about breath, meditation, controlling the fluctuations of the mind. And obviously there was meditation going on, sitting. The word asana means take a seat. But here in the Pradipika, we actually have the first explanation and description of yoga poses. An interesting thing to learn, and maybe you'll take a look at that. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the first self-study class in yoga philosophy. And as promised, we're ending this class with the great day in history today, and with a contemporary yogi, you. And so my questions for you are, when you look over this briefly retold history of yoga, what strikes you? What one or two or three or five things absolutely jump out as different, new, exciting, encouraging, discouraging? And then my second question is, how does this overview change some of your impressions of yoga? And then finally, what do you want to remember? Is there anything that, because of this, you want to include in your teaching or in your own personal practice of yoga? Sometimes when we know the history of something, our attitudes towards the current situation change. So, thanks for being with me on this journey so far. I look forward to our discussion, either the next hour or at the set time in the schedule if you've done this before. And I would ask you to remember that for our next meeting, please read the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. There's 18 chapters in the Gita. We're going to break it down and look at 6 over 3 classes. hopefully to give you enough time to read those sections in between. And our discussions of the Gita will be during the discussion portion of the class. I won't be doing a lot of writing about it. I think when I look at ancient text and spiritual text, I think sometimes the best relationship is between you and the text. And I'm glad that you all read Ewasran's introduction because it's excellent. But now the important thing is for you to encounter the text and to see what it does for you. So that's your homework for the next meeting. But for now, think over how this history of yoga influences your current practice and thinking and questions. Take care.